had to stop over at work. How are you guys doing? My name is Kieran and welcome back to Close to Broke. Today, we have a pretty fun day in store as we're going to be going to play poker. But before we get into that, there's a couple things I wanted to point out. As you guys can see, my hair is obviously fairly pink. During this month, we're going to be doing something pretty interesting. Almost as interesting as this ridiculous barking job from our compatriot over here. Today, well, for actually the entire month of October, we're going to be giving away all the money that we make from our YouTube ad revenue to, breast cancer awareness. We're either going to donate it to a charity, or what I'd like to do and what I'm leaning towards is trying to impact somebody in a more personal way, whether that's somebody that you guys vote for us to help, whether it's a family member, a loved one, a friend. I think that's leaning towards what I want to do. It's not a ton of money, but it's something, and I think it's a fun way for us to collaborate. And you guys don't have to do anything besides watch the videos. Like I said, the usual announcements. October 15th, which is a Saturday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. We're gonna be hosting our very first Hustler meetup game. It's gonna be a ton of fun. I'm really excited about it, and I can't thank you guys enough, like I said, for supporting us as a team. Hopefully the month of October is good for us. Even if it's not, I'm excited to give back. Otherwise, let's hop into today's episode at the Commerce Casino. In this very first hand, we haven't even got our chips out of the rack. It seems like we constantly get ourselves in trouble. I'm in the big blind with King 9 of clubs here. $35 is a good price. I make the call and we're going off to a flop that's pretty decent as it comes Queen 5-3 with 2 clubs. With the action checked over to my opponent, he decides to throw out a C-bet of $35. With the action now back on me, we're both playing 150 big blinds to start the hand. And I think at this point, getting some more money in the middle makes sense. I decided to make a raise to $135. Taking the pot down with king high seems great as well. We get a bunch of better hands to fold. Middling pairs, ace highs probably have to fold if they don't contain a club. Our opponent ends up pretty quickly folding. So we're going to go ahead and take that pot down. Great to start off the episode and the session with a W. Let's move on. This next hand is quite the doozy, so bear with me as we go over the details. I'm in early position. I look down at 8-9 of clubs. Good enough to raise, $30 to go. Late position decides to 3-bet here to $90, and something really odd happens. The big blind decides to cold call. What I mean by being odd is it is really, really scary to just cold call a 3-bet out of position from the blinds. Either our opponent has a really good hand or he's got something marginal that he's trying to see some flop situations with. My hand is just too good to fold. I go ahead and make the call here, and we're going off to a very decent flop that comes 9, 5, 7 with 1 club and 2 hearts. We flop ourselves a backdoor flush draw, top pair, and a gutter ball to a straight. Our opponent from the big blind decides to donk lead for $200. This is worrisome for a ton of different reasons. Specifically, the sizing is pretty big here. Our opponent's going well over 2/3 here. I have top pair, a gut shot, and a backdoor. My hand is too strong to fold at this specific juncture. I think if we face any more aggression, we can pretty confidently throw our hand away. It's hard to understand how people play. I think I get in my head sometimes trying to dive in too deep, but I think playing it pretty simple ABC at this point. My hand's too good to fold. We're going off to a turn after our initial 3-better decides to fold. And the turn card comes a 5 of spades. Pairing the board here shouldn't change a whole lot. If I was ahead, I'm still ahead. If our opponent was ahead, he's still ahead as well. Our opponent decides to check it over to me, which is a little confusing at this point. I don't think that betting here does a whole lot for me. All those flush draws for sure make up my opponent's range, but I think he's going to have a ton of jacks, 10s that are going to be pot controlling here, and the last thing I want to do is value on myself. So I'm going to go ahead and check it back, and we're going off to a river card that comes a 7 of spades. At this point, I'm pretty much over the hand, board double pairs. It's really hard for people to end up bluffing here. Again, it's unfortunate that the flush draw does not come in, which makes this a tougher fold or a call either way. But luckily for us, our opponent ends up checking it to me, and at this point, I am very happy to realize my equity in the sense of taking the showdown value. I go ahead and check it back, and our opponent quickly shows ace 7 of hearts. So an absolute doozy from our opponent here for many different reasons. Cold calling a 3-bet against what I perceive to be a pretty tight player pre-flop is really interesting with the hand as marginal as this. To be fair, I've done a whole lot worse. Otherwise, we can just chalk it up to an L. At this point, we have table changed over. The last table was a little too slow for me. Let's hop into this next hand. There's 2 early position limpers, then the cutoff and the button limp, and the action gets to me in the big blind, and I look down at a suited connector. Obviously, going 5, 6, 7 ways post-flop is never good with pretty much any holding, so I decide to make the price of poker $80. The 2 early position limpers make the call. Luckily, the later position players fold. We're going 3 ways off to a flop that comes king, king, queen with 2 hearts. Flopping a flush draw as well as a range advantage board on this texture. I decide to go ahead and throw out a c-bet here. I have all the kings, all the ace king, all the king queen, all the king jack, all the king 10. Of course, our opponents can have some of those marginal holdings as well, king 10, king 9. But c-bet in order. I'm making 90 bucks to go. Both players, after a little bit of thinking, decide to make the fold. We're going to go ahead and take it 9 high, although we did have a flush draw. Always happy to take it down on a paired board. Moving on. Moving right along here, I find myself in the hijack with 7-5 suited. A suited 1 gapper, although in theory not the best thing in the world to open up here. So it seems like a nice steal spot. Unfortunately, that does not happen to be the case here, as not only does a big blind call, but the cutoff calls as well. We're on 3 ways off to a flop that comes 9-9-3 rainbow. I end up checking it over to the cutoff, who checks it back. We're going off to a turn card that comes a queen of diamonds now. Alright, this is not too bad here, as it does bring us a backdoor flush draw. With the action checked over to me, I decide to bet out here for $40. Our opponent from the cutoff decides to make the call. We're going off to a river card that comes a 4 of spades. Fortunately, we don't end up getting there. And again, you put yourself in this situation where I have 7 high, probably one of the worst hands I'm ever going to end up on this river with. Can't think of many worse. So I decided to bomb it. $200 to go, going for a pot-sized bet. We couldn't have got snapped off any faster. Queen Jack ends up making the call here from the cutoff. Good hand to you, sir. Going to go ahead and remember that our opponent can definitely call us. Even though, again, this is a pretty straightforward call for recreational, in my opinion. Anytime you face a pot-sized bet, it's a little scary. So keeping that one in the notebook, moving along to the next hand. In this following hand, early position decides to limp, which, as you guys can tell, has been pretty much the main action of today's episode. A lot of really slow playing, a ton of limping, a ton of me having to isolate and trying to connect with these flops that kind of either crush us or have been absolute dog water for us. It actually ends up folding to me in the big blind, and I look down at Big Slick. Ace King is a beautiful sight to see, especially for these sore eyes. I may get $50 to go. Early position limper calls. We're going off to a flop that comes Queen Jack 3 with 2 diamonds. This is a good board to c-bet because, again, I have outs to the nuts and 2 overs. I continue with a bet here, looking to lay the story that I have over pairs, ace queen, ace jack, $50 to go. Our opponent pretty quickly calls, and we're going off to a turn card that comes an ace of hearts. Nice. So the only specific holdings that improve for our opponent are going to be ace jack, ace queen, and king 10. Ace queen and ace jack seem like pretty slam dunk raises from our opponent here. I don't think I can be too scared of that. I decided to bet here one more time for $130. Our opponent thinks about it for a second before ending up relinquishing his hand. Unfortunate for us there, as we couldn't get any more value, but happy we ended up turning that bink of an ace on the turn. In the very next shuffle, as you guys can see, this is still the same video. Under the gun decides to make it $30 to go. Late position calls, and the action is now on me in the small blind. I can go several of which ways, but I think the best option to go with is the aggressive one. I'm in the small blind, I'm out of position. If I'm in a 3-bet, I've got to go large. I think at this point, the sizing that makes the most sense is going to be at the very minimum, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6x. We have a raise, a call, I'm out of position, in the worst position in poker. I make it $190 to go, continuing with the aggression. And luckily for us, both opponents end up making the fold. So it's little hands like this that you try to capitalize on, and hopefully you can eke out some value. Continuing to move along in the session. Been a little rocky, down a little bit here, but like I said, continuing forward, looking to progress. It can only go up from here, right? In this following hand, we don't have any video, but bear with me. Action folds over to me in the cutoff, and I look down at King of Spades, 10 of Clubs. I decide to open it up here for 3x, $30 to go. Both blinds make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes Queen 9-3 with 2 spades and a club. This is a pretty good flop for us in many ways. Open-ender, an overcard, as well as a backdoor second nut flush draw. With the action checking over to me, I think a c-bet is in order. I make it $40 to go, going somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% pot. Both players end up making the call, which is a little worrisome, hoping to get bailed out. And the turn card comes, none of that. 7 of hearts. With the action starting off on the small line here, he decides to lead out. With the action folded over to me, I think my hand's too good to just fold at this juncture. We have outs to the nuts here and clean ones at that, as well as an overcard. We're going to a river after calling that comes a deuce of clubs. That's pretty not good. With the action on my opponent, at this point, he decides to lead out once again for $225. The leading is getting to me. The donk leads, frustrating. can't react to them very well. I do consider throwing out a raise on the river, but again, I don't think I can make a lot of sense here besides maybe pocket queens or pocket nines. After a bit of thinking, I decided to just go ahead and lay this one down. Our opponent will never show what he had here, but again, we'll just live with it. We got some more hands to go over, so let's get through it. In this following hand, under the gun decides to limp, late position decides to isolate for $40. I find myself in the big blind with queen 3 suited. Against these two specific actions, I think this is usually a fold, but against this specific sizing, I think I can treat this as just an initial open. I go ahead and make the call here. Defending a suited Broadway is never too bad anyways. The limper makes a call as well, and we're going off to a flop that comes 5 deuce deuce with 2 clubs and a spade. This is a really good actually flop for us to lead out on sometimes. I'm going to have all of the deuces, I think. I'm going to have all of the 5s in my range here. It makes sense to me. I'm going to have the most suited hands in my range. But I end up just checking it, and the action checks through. We're going off to a turn card that comes to 4 of clubs. We now pick up an open ender, although it does bring in the front door flush draw. But with nobody taking a stab at this pot, even the in-position players specifically, I think I can discount a ton of flushes. Of course, the in-position or the early position limper, I should say, can still have some flushes, but I think we can pretty comfortably remove the initial raiser. Why not take over the reins? I decided to bet out here for $125. I'm trying to go the size of the pot, really starting to polarize myself. After a bit of thinking, both opponents end up making the fold. Really great there. I think that was an easy heads-up play for us to take over. Doesn't even matter what you have sometimes. I think just playing your ranges accordingly post-flop against people that are at least willing to respect your range make a lot of sense. And for us in this specific case, it ended up making dollars, like 120 of them to be exact. In this following hand, middle position decides to limp. The action's now on me in late position with king 10 offsuit. Broadway seems okay, late position, isolation in order, $50 to go. It gets back to the limper, who's done something I would not have expected. At least I haven't seen this in a while. The old limp back raise. I haven't seen him do it all night, and maybe my hand's not good enough to call, but the saving grace is it's only 4x. I'm in position. I'm willing to play. We're both playing somewhere in the neighborhood of 2K effective or something. So why the hell not make the call? We're going off to a flop that comes king 9-3 with 2 spades and 1 club. We end up flopping top pair here, but we do have to proceed with caution. People like this just don't have the tendency to just blast. And I do have a live read that I'm still trying to figure out if it's good or bad here. Our opponent decides to c-bet for $200. And the one thing I will note, I don't know if the video picks it up at all, but I could see that his hand is shaking. And this is one of the few reads that I think are most common in poker, but it's the hardest to decipher what it specifically is implying or meaning. As often as it means the person is scared and bluffing, it's just as often as the person is so excited to get money in the middle, they can't believe their luck, they have pocket aces. I think at this specific juncture, I don't know what it is yet. I don't know if it's good or bad. I have top pair. I have a backdoor flush draw. I've got to at least make one call here. So we're going off to a turn card that comes a 6 of clubs. Okay, it ends up bringing a backdoor flush draw. Doesn't change a whole lot to the board texture. And when our opponent decides to bet $500, and again, going pretty small, leaving himself somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 to $900 behind. Usually I don't do this, but in this specific case, I have to ask myself, am I playing for stacks or am I not? Because if I call 500 here, if the river comes a queen, jack, 7, 3, 4, whatever, pretty much anything but an ace, I have to call if he goes all in. And I don't really want to do that. I don't think I want to do that. I think I'm pretty confident in my live read here. His hand is still shaking as he sets out the bet. I don't want to take anything away from this player. If he does it, awesome. You bluffed the hardest person to bluff on YouTube, the biggest calling station. But in this specific case, I'm going to go ahead, tip my cat off, and surrender the pot. Good hand to you, sir. I don't fold top pair easily, and not to bets as small as I just faced, but I'm going to give it to you, sir. Good hand. I'm under the gun with ace-king offsuit. I end up raising to $30. +1 and +2 make the call. We're going off to a flop that is outstanding as it comes ace-9 deuce rainbow. With the action on me, this is a board that I have pretty much absolutely dominated. I can definitely bet here for value, but against 2 recreational players, I think playing a little differently makes more sense. I decided to just check here knowing that I can set up for 2 really big barrels or at least 1 really big barrel on the river if I need to. Ends up checking around, which makes me feel really, really good about my hand, but almost too good. Maybe somebody needs to catch up. And the turn card comes the 7 of spades. Doesn't change anything to the board texture. If I'm ahead, I'm still way ahead. I decided to bet at this point here for $60. I think getting called here by one or both opponents doesn't change anything of the outcome for me specifically. I'm looking to bomb the river either way. Only one player, which is the +1 player, decides to make the call. We're going off to a river card that